Have you ever caught yourself criticizing so much that it seems impossible to trust yourself? That inner voice that whispers, "You're not good enough, you'll fail," or "Why try if you already know it won't work?" If the answer is yes, you are not alone. Excessive self-criticism is a challenge that many people face, and it can paralyze even the most talented and dedicated. Imagine the scene. You are about to present an important project at work. Instead of feeling confident, your mind is invaded by thoughts like, "What if I make a mistake? What if everyone realizes that I am not able?" These thoughts not only undermine your confidence, but they can also sabotage their performance. And the worst is that we often don't even realize how much this critical voice is in control. But what if I told you that there is a way to silence this self-criticism and build genuine self-confidence? What's more, that you can do this using practical principles of a millennial philosophy, Stoicism. That's exactly what we will explore in this video. Stoicism is not just an ancient philosophy, it is a guide to modern life, full of tools we can use to deal with emotional challenges, such as excessive self-criticism. Excessive self-criticism is like a blurry mirror that distorts our image of ourselves. Instead of seeing our qualities and achievements, we only see defects and failures. This negative internal voice can arise at any time by making a mistake at work, comparing yourself with other people, or even trying something new. The problem is that when we hear this voice, it can paralyze us, preventing us from making decisions, risking or even taking advantage of the small victories of everyday life. But why are we so critical of ourselves? In many cases, self-criticism is a defense mechanism. From an early age, we learn that if we are hard with ourselves, we may avoid flaws or disappointments. However, what was supposed to be a form of protection turns out to be a trap. Excessive self-criticism can lead to procrastination, anxiety, and in more severe cases, depression. It prevents us from trusting our skills and believing that we are able to achieve our goals. This is where Stoicism comes in as a powerful tool. You may be wondering, what an ancient philosophy has to do with the modern challenges of self-criticism? The answer is everything. Stoicism, created more than 2,000 years ago by thinkers such as Seneca, Epicteto, and Marco Aurelio, is a practical philosophy that teaches us how to deal with the adversities of life. Stoics believed that although we cannot control everything that happens around us, we can control how we react to these situations. And that includes the way we deal with our thoughts and emotions. For Stoic, the key to a balanced life is to focus on what is under our control and accept what is not. When we apply this principle to self-criticism, we realize that we cannot control the thoughts that arise in our mind, but we can control how we respond to them. Instead of passively accepting the critical voice, we can question it, reformulate it, and finally silence it. Now that we know how self-criticism can affect us and how Stoicism can help us, let's go to the practical steps to put this learning in action in your daily life. Each of the following steps is based on Stoic principles, but adapted to modern reality, allowing you to build genuine self-confidence and reduce self-criticism. Step 1. Recognize self-criticism. The first step in silencing self-criticism is simple but powerful, recognizing that it is there. It seems obvious, but we are often so used to this negative inner voice that we don't even realize how much it influences our thoughts and actions. It is like a constant background noise, always present, but rarely questioned. To begin with, pay attention to the moments when self-criticism arises. It may be when you make a mistake, when you compare with other people, or when you are about to try something new. When you notice these thoughts, take a break and identify them clearly. You can even say to yourself, "This is my critical voice talking." Recognizing self-criticism is the first step in taking its power. When you identify these thoughts, you begin to distance yourself from them, realizing that they do not define who you are. And this makes room for the next steps, where we will learn to question and reformulate this inner voice. Step 2. Apply the control dichotomy. One of the most powerful principles of Stoicism is the dichotomy of control, which teaches us to separate what is under our control of what is not. When we apply this idea to self-criticism, we realize that many of the negative thoughts we have about ourselves are linked to things we cannot control, such as the opinion of others or the result of a situation. For example, imagine that you are about to make a presentation at work. Instead of worrying about what others will think, something you don't control, focus on what is under your control, your preparation, your breathing, and your posture. When you direct your energy to what you can influence, self-criticism loses strength because you are acting proactively. The next time the critical voice arises, ask yourself, is this under my control? If the answer is no, let go. If so, act. This simple change of perspective can reduce anxiety and increase your self-confidence because you will be focusing on what really matters. Step 3. Practice self-pity. How many times have you caught yourself being extremely critical of yourself, but would you treat a friend with kindness and understanding if he was in the same situation? Self-pity is the practice of dealing with the same kindness and empathy you would offer to someone you love. And while it seems simple, it can be transformative when it comes to silencing self-criticism. When the negative inner voice arises, try to change the tone. Instead of thinking you are a failure, tell yourself you are learning and growing up. Making mistakes is part of the process. This change of language may seem small, but it gradually reprograms your mind to see challenges as growth opportunities, not as inadequacy evidence. A practical example: if you make a mistake in a presentation, instead of criticizing, recognize that everyone makes mistakes and that it does not define their value. Ask yourself, what would I say to a friend who went through this? And then direct these kind words to yourself. Self-pity is not about ignoring their mistakes, but about treating them with patience and understanding. When you practice self-pity, the critical voice loses space and self-confidence begins to flourish. Step 4. Use negative viewing. Negative visualization is a Stoic practice that consists in imagining the worst possible scenario of a situation. It may seem counterintricate, but by anticipating the challenges, you reduce the fear of failure and the self-criticism that arises when things do not come out as expected. For example, imagine that you are about to start a new project at work. Instead of worrying about thoughts like, what if I fail? Use the negative visualization to imagine what would happen if the worst scenario really happened. You may make a mistake, get negative feedback, or even need to start over. Now ask yourself, would I be able to deal with it? The answer, almost always, is yes. By viewing the worst scenario, you realize that even the most difficult challenges are manageable. This diminishes anxiety and self-criticism because you have already prepared yourself mentally to face obstacles. In addition, this practice helps to value what you have already achieved and see problems as growth opportunities, not as threats. Negative visualization is not about being pessimistic, but about being prepared. When you feel more prepared, the critical voice loses strength and you gain confidence to act. Step 5. Reform. Critical thoughts. Self-criticism often manifests itself as absolute and exaggerated thoughts, such as, I never do anything right, or I am a failure. These thoughts are not only inaccurate, but also reinforce a distorted view of ourselves. Cognitive reformulation is a technique that helps us question and reformulate these negative thoughts by replacing them with more realistic and compassionate statements. When the critical voice arises, ask yourself, is this thought really true? Does he help me in any way? Instead of automatically accepting criticism, seek evidence that contradicts it. For example, if you think, I never do anything right, remember times when you succeeded or overcome challenges. then reformulates thought more in a more balanced way. Change. I never do anything right, for I made a mistake, but that doesn't define my ability. I have skills and learn from my mistakes. Step 6. Adopt the mindfulness. Stoic. Long live the present moment. Mindfulness, or full attention, is a concept that has gained great popularity in recent years, but its roots can be found in Stoicism. Stoic philosophers have always emphasized the importance of living at the present moment and focusing on what is under our now, without getting lost in worries about the past or the future. Self-criticism often feeds on thoughts about the past. I should have done it better, or about the future. What if I fail again? Mindfulness teaches us how to focus on the present, leaving these thoughts behind. When we are fully present, self-criticism loses its strength, for our mind is no longer stuck in past judgments or fears of what is to come. Reserve a few minutes of your day to completely focus on what you are doing, whether working, walking, or even simply breathing. Pay attention to the moment and what you are feeling, without judging yourself. Step 8. Define your own successful metrics. Many times, self-criticism arises because we are comparing ourselves with external standards, whether with co-workers, friends, or public figures. However, Stoics believed that true peace comes from living according to our own principles and standards. Instead of measuring our value based on what others find or what society expects from us, we can define our own successful metrics. By adopting this approach, you break free from constant comparison and begin to live more authentically. Set what is successful to you based on your values and what you want to achieve. This reduces self-criticism because you are no longer trying to adapt to external expectations that can be unrealized or decontextualized. Practical example. Instead of comparing yourself with someone who had a great success in your career, ask yourself, what would be a success for me? What would I like to achieve regardless of what others are doing? When you focus on your own way, it is easier to see progress, and thus self-criticism loses its power. The positive impact of Stoicism goes beyond self-criticism. By applying Stoic principles in everyday life, you can improve various areas, such as your relationships, your emotional balance, and even your productivity. Stoicism is a practical philosophy, which means it applies not only to mind, but also to daily actions. Let's see some examples of how this philosophy can impact other areas of your life. 1. Reduction of stress and anxiety. Modern life is full of stress and pressure. However, by applying the dichotomy of control, you learn not to waste mental energy with things that cannot change. This diminishes stress because you begin to realize that many of the things you care are external and out of your control. In addition, mindfulness practice and radical acceptance help to release the need to control all aspects of life. When you allow yourself to accept what comes without resistance, stress decreases and the feeling of internal peace begins to prevail. 2. Improvement in interpersonal relationships. Stoics also believe to live according to virtue and treat others with respect and dignity. This applies directly to the way we relate to other people. When you apply the principles of Stoic philosophy, such as empathy and patience in your interactions, you tend to be more understanding and less reactive. Self-criticism often makes us focus on ourselves, creating barriers in relationships. By focusing on the present and practicing acceptance, you are able to maintain a more open and healthy perspective in interactions. 3. Increased productivity and focus. When you start to live according to what is under your control and accept what you can't change, your productivity increases. Stress and self-criticism tend to distract us, creating mental blocks that make tasks more difficult. By focusing on our actions and at the present time, we become more efficient and able to accomplish what we propose. 4. Increased resilience. Life is full of challenges, but by adopting the Stoic mindset, you develop greater mental resilience. When we understand that failure is part of the journey and not something to be feared, we become stronger and prepared to deal with future difficulties. Excessive self-criticism, which usually prevents us from moving forward, is replaced by the acceptance that failures are temporary and that we can always learn from them. In short, Stoicism offers a powerful set of tools that can help us face self-criticism effectively. By adopting practices such as controlled dichotomy, radical acceptance, and reformulation of negative thoughts, we can build a healthier and more resilient mindset. Self-criticism does not need to govern your life. With Stoic philosophy, you have the resources to deal with this negative internal voice constructively, without allowing it to control your actions or define its value. By cultivating self-pity, living in the present moment, and defining your own successful standards, you begin to break free from the shackles of self-criticism, allowing your self-confidence to flourish. Remember, the journey is not easy, but the constant practice of Stoic principles will bring lasting results. The way to a quieter, self-confident and resilient mind begins with the decision to question self-criticism and embrace the philosophy of acceptance and self-knowledge. If you apply these tools consistently, you will soon see a transformation in your life. The goal is to live according to your values, act with courage, and make decisions based on your true essence, not the fear of making mistakes or the desire to please others. So the next time self-criticism begins to invade your mind, remember that you have the power to reformulate these thoughts and create a new narrative for your life based on trust, acceptance, and constant search for improvement.